The microbiome mood-craving connection. Swap out how trillions of gut bacteria influence your brain, sleep, appetite, and happiness. Malshart, Dr. Nitin Yende. Have you ever found yourself standing in front of the refrigerator, not because you were hungry, but because you were craving something? Chocolate, ice cream, bread, chips, sugar, something specific, something urgent. And no matter how much willpower you used, the craving seems stronger than logic. Now here's a question. What if that craving wasn't entirely yours? What if part of that desire, part of that urge, part of that seemingly irrational food decision was being influenced by trillions of microscopic organisms living inside your body? It sounds like science fiction. But modern microbiome research is revealing something extraordinary. Inside every human being lives an ecosystem, a vast biological civilization, a living network of bacteria, fungi, viruses, and microorganisms that outnumber human cells and communicate constantly with the brain. These organisms influence digestion, immunity, inflammation, sleep, mood, metabolism, and increasingly, research suggests they may even influence what we want to eat. Today we're exploring one of the most fascinating frontiers in modern medicine, the microbiome, and why your gut may be influencing your brain far more than you realize. Let's begin with a surprising fact. For most of medical history, the digestive system was viewed primarily as a food processing tube. Food goes in, nutrients are absorbed, waste comes out. Simple, or so we thought. Today, scientists know something very different. The gut is one of the most biologically active systems in the human body. Some researchers even call it the second brain. Not because it thinks, but because it contains an enormous network of neurons, over 100 million nerve cells, more than the spinal cord, and these neurons are constantly communicating with the brain, every second, every minute, every day of your life. This communication system is called the gut-brain axis, and it may be one of the most important biological networks ever discovered. Imagine two cities connected by a superhighway. Information travels continuously in both directions. The brain sends signals to the gut. The gut sends signals back. This communication influences appetite, stress, emotion, sleep, energy, immune activity, even decision-making, and standing in the middle of this communication highway are trillions of microorganisms, the microbiome. Now let's appreciate the scale. Your digestive system contains roughly 100 trillion microorganisms, collectively weighing approximately the same as the human brain. Think about that. Inside your body exists an ecosystem weighing several pounds, an ecosystem that produces chemicals, processes nutrients, modifies hormones, interacts with the immune system, and helps regulate metabolism. You are not simply a human being. You are a biological partnership. Part human, part microbial ecosystem. And that ecosystem matters enormously. One of the most exciting discoveries in neuroscience involves serotonin. Many people know serotonin as the happiness neurotransmitter, the molecule associated with mood and emotional well-being. But here's something fascinating. Approximately 90% of the body's serotonin is produced in the gut, not the brain, the gut. That doesn't mean gut serotonin directly causes happiness. The relationship is more complex, but it demonstrates something profound. The digestive system is deeply involved in neurochemistry, far more than we once believed. Now let's talk about cravings, because this is where things become truly fascinating. Why do humans crave certain foods? The traditional explanation was simple: willpower, preference, habit. But microbiome research suggests another possibility. Different bacterial populations thrive on different nutrients. Some flourish when we eat fiber-rich foods. Others thrive on highly processed foods. Some prefer complex carbohydrates. Others benefit from diets rich in plants. And remarkably, certain microbial populations may influence signaling pathways related to appetite and food preference. In other words, the microbiome may help shape what we feel like eating, not by controlling us, but by influencing the biological environment in which decisions are made. Suddenly, cravings become much more interesting because they may not be solely psychological. They may be biological. Imagine a garden. Whatever you feed grows. Whatever you neglect shrinks. The microbiome operates similarly. Feed beneficial microbial communities consistently, and they expand. Feed other communities, and they expand instead. Every meal becomes an environmental decision. Every food choice shapes the ecosystem. And over time, the ecosystem begins influencing us in return. This creates a fascinating feedback loop. Diet shapes microbes, microbes influence biology, biology influences food choices, and the cycle continues. Now let's shift to mood, because this may be where the microbiome becomes most interesting. Over the past decade, researchers have discovered striking relationships between gut health and mental health. People experiencing depression often show differences in microbiome composition compared to healthy populations. People experiencing chronic stress often demonstrate changes in gut microbial diversity, inflammation, immune activity, stress hormones, neurotransmitter signaling. All appear connected to the microbiome in ways we are still trying to understand. This doesn't mean bacteria cause depression. Mental health is extraordinarily complex, but it does suggest the gut may influence emotional well-being more than previously imagined. Think about the language we use. We say, I have a gut feeling, my stomach dropped. I feel sick with worry. I have butterflies in my stomach. For centuries, these expressions sounded poetic. Today, they sound scientific. Because emotions and digestive function are deeply connected. The body has always known this. Science is finally catching up. Let's talk about stress, because stress is one of the greatest disruptors of microbial health. When the body enters chronic fight or flight mode, blood flow changes, digestion changes, hormone patterns change, inflammatory pathways change, and the microbiome changes too. Stress doesn't just affect the brain. Stress affects the ecosystem living inside the body. And once again, the relationship becomes bidirectional. Stress influences microbes. Microbes influence stress resilience. Everything is connected. Now let's discuss sleep, one of the most overlooked relationships in modern health. The connection between the microbiome and sleep quality. Emerging research suggests that microbial diversity may influence circadian rhythms, inflammatory signaling, and neurotransmitter production. Poor sleep alters the microbiome. An unhealthy microbiome may contribute to poorer sleep. Another feedback loop, another reminder that biology rarely operates in isolation. The body functions as a system, not a collection of separate organs. This system's perspective changes everything. For decades, we treated health like independent compartments. Sleep over here, mood over there, metabolism somewhere else, digestion somewhere else. Today, we understand something different. The body is an interconnected network. Everything influences everything else. Sleep affects metabolism. Metabolism affects inflammation. Inflammation affects mood. Mood affects behavior. Behavior affects diet. Diet affects the microbiome. The microbiome influences the brain. Round and round the cycle goes. This is why simplistic health solutions often fail. Because health is not a single variable problem, it's a systems problem. No single supplement can solve everything. No single diet can solve everything. No single medication can solve everything. Real health emerges from understanding connections, patterns, relationships, biological ecosystems. Now here's the encouraging news. The microbiome is dynamic. It changes, it adapts, it responds. Unlike genetics, which are relatively fixed, the microbiome can shift remarkably quickly. Diet matters, fiber matters, plant diversity matters, physical activity matters, sleep matters, stress management matters. The choices we make every day influence this internal ecosystem, and that means we have influence over the process. One of the most powerful dietary concepts emerging from microbiome science is diversity. Not necessarily perfection, diversity. Different vegetables, different fruits, different fibers, different plant compounds. A diverse ecosystem tends to support a more resilient microbial environment, and resilience is one of the defining characteristics of health. Whether we're discussing ecosystems, economies, or biology, resilience matters. This brings us to the future. The next decade may transform how we think about health, not simply treating disease, but understanding ecosystems, understanding patterns, understanding biological networks. Wearable technology helped us observe sleep, stress, recovery, and physiology. Microbiome science may help us understand another layer entirely, the invisible ecosystem influencing many aspects of human health. At OXYZEN, this vision is deeply exciting, because the future of health isn't merely collecting more data. The future is understanding connections, understanding how sleep affects cravings, how stress affects digestion, how microbes influence mood, how physiology influences behavior, because awareness creates better decisions, and better decisions create better outcomes. So the next time you experience a craving, a mood shift, a difficult night's sleep, or unexplained fatigue, remember something. You are not merely managing your body. You are managing an ecosystem, a living biological partnership that has evolved alongside humans for millions of years. And the more we learn about that partnership, the more we realize something remarkable. The future of medicine may not simply be about treating humans. It may be about understanding the trillions of organisms helping make us who we are. I'm Dr. Yende. Thank you for joining me for another episode of OXYZEN Health Intelligence. Remember, your body is always communicating. Sometimes the message is coming from places we never expected. I'll see you in the next episode. Recommended YouTube title: The Microbiome Mood Craving Connection: How Your Gut Controls Your Brain, Sleep and Appetite. Now thumbnail text: Your gut is talking to your brain. Or, are your bacteria choosing your food? Or, the second brain inside you. Have you ever found yourself standing in front of the refrigerator, staring into the glow of the crisper light, not because your stomach is growling, but because something inside you is tugging at your attention? Maybe it was a sudden specific desire, chocolate calling like a siren, ice cream promising comfort, the warm pull of bread, the crunch of chips, a sharp, almost demanding urge for sugar. You tell yourself you'll resist. You mean to make a sensible choice, and yet the urge feels bigger than willpower, more urgent than logic. Now consider a provocative question. What if that urge wasn't entirely yours? What if part of that pull, the sudden insistence for a certain flavor or texture, was being shaped by trillions of microscopic organisms living inside your body? It sounds like science fiction, but the science of the microbiome is revealing something extraordinary. We host an internal ecosystem that talks to our brains, shapes our biology, and subtly nudges our behavior. Inside every human being lives a bustling biological civilization, a vast network of bacteria, fungi, viruses, and other microorganisms that collectively outnumber our human cells and exchange chemical messages with our nervous system. These organisms do far more than help digest food. They influence immunity, inflammation, sleep, mood, metabolism, and increasingly researchers suggest they may help shape what we want to eat. For most of medical history, the digestive tract was seen as a simple plumbing system. Food goes in, nutrients are absorbed, waste goes out, end of story. But modern science tells a different tale. The gut is one of the body's most biologically active systems. Some researchers even call it a second brain. Not because it thinks in the way your cortex does, but because it contains an enormous self-contained network of neurons, more than 100 million nerve cells in fact, communicating with the brain every moment of every day. This continuous two-way dialogue is known as the gut-brain axis, and it's emerging as one of the most important biological networks we've discovered. Picture two cities linked by a superhighway. Information flows both ways, nonstop. The brain sends signals that affect digestion, immune function, and appetite. The digestive system sends back information about nutrient status, microbial composition, and hormonal signals. This back and forth regulates appetite, emotional responses, stress levels, sleep quality, energy, and even decision-making. And riding on that highway, shaping and responding to the traffic, are trillions of microorganisms, the microbiome. To appreciate the scale of this partnership, picture an ecosystem inside your abdomen. Roughly 100 trillion microorganisms living along your digestive tract, collectively weighing several pounds, comparable to the weight of the human brain. These tiny inhabitants produce chemicals, break down nutrients, transform hormones, train the immune system, and help regulate metabolism. In other words, you are not just a human being, you are a biological partnership, part human, part microbial, and that partnership shapes your physiology in powerful and unexpected ways. One of the most striking discoveries linking gut biology to brain function concerns serotonin. Many people know serotonin as a neurotransmitter tied to mood and emotional balance. But here's a striking detail. About 90% of the body's serotonin is produced in the gut, primarily by cells in the intestinal lining. That doesn't mean gut-produced serotonin directly makes us happy in the way brain serotonin does. Neurochemistry is more complex than a simple one-to-one relationship. But it absolutely shows the gut is deeply involved in the body's neurochemical environment. The digestive system is a major contributor to the chemistry that influences mood, and that should change how we think about mental health. Now let's talk about cravings, because this is where the story gets especially intriguing. Traditionally, cravings have been explained as matters of willpower, preference, or habit. And those things matter, of course, but microbiome research offers a new layer of explanation. Different bacterial species thrive on different nutrients. Some flourish on fiber-rich, plant-based foods. Others prefer simple sugars or ultra-processed foods. Some microbes favor complex carbohydrates, others do better with animal fats. As certain microbial communities expand in response to the foods we give them, they can indirectly influence the signaling pathways that shape appetite, taste preference, and even mood. In other words, the microbes we feed may nudge us toward feeding them. Think of your gut like a garden. Whatever you plant and water grows, whatever you neglect shrivels. Each meal is an environmental decision that alters the balance of that garden. Feed beneficial microbes with diverse fibers and plant compounds, and they flourish. Habitually supply sugar and ultra-processed food, and other populations overgrow. Over time, the community composition changes the biological signals sent to your brain: hormones, short-chain fatty acids, neurotransmitter precursors, creating a feedback loop. Diet shapes microbes, microbes shape biology, biology shapes cravings, and cravings shape diet again. Mood is another area where the microbiome's influence is becoming clearer. Over the past decade, scientists have documented consistent differences in microbiome composition among people with depression, anxiety, and chronic stress compared to healthier controls. Chronic stress, in particular, is a potent disruptor. When the body remains in fight or flight mode, blood flow shifts away from digestion, digestion slows, hormones like cortisol rise, inflammatory pathways activate, and the microbiome shifts in response. That altered microbial state can, in turn, influence immune signaling, neurotransmitter production, and stress reactivity. This isn't to say microbes cause depression in a simplistic sense. Mental health is complex and multifactorial, but the gut clearly plays a role in the biological web that underlies emotional well-being. The language we use for feelings, gut feeling, butterflies in the stomach, my stomach dropped, has always felt poetic. Now, those metaphors are grounded in biology. The gut and the brain are physically and chemically linked. Sensations in the gut are part of the same bodily conversation that produces emotion. Sleep, too, is tightly woven into this story. Emerging research suggests that microbial diversity and activity interact with circadian rhythms and inflammatory pathways in ways that can influence sleep quality. Poor sleep alters the microbiome. An imbalanced microbiome may worsen sleep. That creates yet another feedback loop. Disrupted sleep promotes metabolic changes and inflammation that reshape microbial communities. Those microbial changes feed back into brain chemistry and sleep regulation. The body doesn't compartmentalize these things. Sleep, digestion, mood, and metabolism are parts of an integrated system. This system's perspective reframes how we approach health. For decades, medicine and self-care have treated conditions as isolated problems. Fix sleep, then fix mood, then fix digestion. But the emerging view is that health is an interplay of networks. Sleep affects metabolism. Metabolism affects inflammation. Inflammation affects mood. Mood affects behavior. Behavior affects diet. Diet affects the microbiome. The microbiome, in turn, influences the brain. It's a loop. Simple, single-variable solutions, one supplement, one pill, one diet, rarely address the full complexity of what's happening. Here's the encouraging part. Unlike our genes, which are largely fixed, the microbiome is dynamic. It adapts. It shifts in response to what we eat, how we move, how well we sleep, and how we manage stress. Diet is a powerful lever. Fiber, plant diversity, and a variety of whole foods tend to support a resilient and diverse microbiome. Physical activity, adequate sleep, and stress reduction help too. These are not vague platitudes. They are practical levers that change the internal ecosystem over days and weeks, sometimes even faster. One of the clearest dietary takeaways from microbiome science is the value of diversity. Not perfection, but variety. Different vegetables, different fruits, varied fibers, and a range of plant compounds. A diverse diet tends to encourage a diverse microbial community, and diversity often equals resilience, whether we're talking about ecosystems or economies or our own biology. A resilient microbiome is more likely to adapt well to stress and support better overall health. Looking forward, the next decade could transform healthcare from treating individual diseases to understanding and managing complex biological ecosystems. Wearables already let us track sleep, heart rate variability, and activity. Microbiome science may add another layer, insight into the invisible ecosystem that shapes so much of our internal experience. The future isn't just more data, it's better understanding of connections and patterns, how sleep influences cravings, how stress shapes digestion, how microbes affect mood, how physiology drives behavior, and that understanding enables smarter decisions, small, practical changes that accumulate into better outcomes. At OXYZEN, this systems vision is what excites us. We're not just interested in collecting metrics, we want to reveal the relationships between them, how a restless night can alter appetite, how chronic stress can change digestion, how the microbes inside you participate in the story of your health. Awareness creates agency, and agency leads to better choices. So the next time you feel a sudden craving, a surprising mood shift, a night of poor sleep, or unexplained fatigue, remember this. You are not just managing an individual body. You are managing an ecosystem, a living, evolving partnership that has co-evolved with humans for millions of years. The trillions of organisms inside you are part of what makes you who you are. And the more we learn about that partnership, the more we appreciate that the future of medicine may be about understanding the communities inside us, not just treating the person in isolation. I'm Dr. Yende. Thank you for joining me for this episode of OXYZEN Health Intelligence. Your body is always communicating, and sometimes that message is coming from places we never expected. Take a moment to listen. I'll see you in the next episode.